So I was having a conversation with a friend the other day about bar modeling, and I had a little bit of a light bulb moment. In an effort to save class time, I've been using pre-made bar models so that I don't have to draw them in front of the class. The problem is that students were not seeing the mental process of me looking at a whole and breaking it down into parts. I know from my research that teacher think-alouds are instrumental when trying to intervene for Tier 2 and Tier 3 kids. And by the way, if you want to geek out on that research, click on the data tab. There's plenty there for you. But I realized that I was depriving some of the students who needed it most to see the mental process of looking at a whole and breaking it down into parts, which is huge for fractional awareness. So I thought a little video in this percentages tab would be appropriate, since I had posted that research study about how important bar models are in figuring out percentage problems. So I'm going to go ahead and demonstrate what I mean using this following word problem right here. So there are 500 people at a school, 30% were boys, 35% were girls, and the rest were staff. How many staff were there? Well, what I would do is I would start by drawing a bar model to show my whole, and I would point out that 100% is the entire population of the school. Then I would look back in my word problem and I would see that 30% were boys, 35% were girls, and the rest were staff. So I want to mark those on my bar model. So I'm going to look at that 30% and I'm going to say to myself, well, that's a little bit less than a third. So I'm going to mark on my bar model right here, just a little bit less than a third, and I'm going to label it. That's 30%, and that section represents boys. I'm going to look here and see that 35% were girls. That's just maybe a little bit more than a third. So I'll mark it like that. A third, remember, is about 33%. And I'm going to label that girls. And then, of course, the rest were staff. And I don't really know how much that is yet because I haven't done the math. But there's my section for staff. So now if I want to finish this word problem, I need to find out how many staff there were. Now, this question is not asking me for a percentage. This question is asking me for a number. So that's what I'm going to figure out. But first, I need to figure out what percentage the staff was. So let's do this. Let's add 30 and 35. We're going to get 65. Okay, then I'm going to subtract that from my whole. My whole, again, is 100%. So I've got 100 minus 65, and I've got 35. Okay, so we now know that 35% of the population of the school were staff. Okay, a little aside moment right here. One thing that I also think is really important is demonstrating finding or just doing the math in front of sixth grade students, even though they should be well versed in how to regroup and subtract. It is still valuable, especially for some of the lower kids, to make sure that they see that process. That's part of the think aloud process. Okay, let's finish this problem off. All right, so now we know that 35% of 500 people are staff. So let's find out how many that was. So I'm going to set this up like a fraction. Remember, I have 35 per, that's my fraction bar, that means per, percent, which means 100. Remember that of means multiplication. So I'm going to multiply 35% times 500 people. And we already know about cross-canceling at this point in the year, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to cancel out those zeros, and now I'm left with 35 times 5. So let's do that math over here. 5 times 5 is 25. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 2 is 17. And my answer is 175 staff. Okay, and that's it. So hopefully that was a helpful explanation of what it means to bar model. That's just one type of bar model that you can do, but it shows kids exactly how to look at the whole and how to break it up mentally into parts.